hitchhikers with credit cards. The current establishment in Washington, D.C. feels like hitchhikers with credit cards. In other words, they're there for a couple of years, maybe 1, 2 terms, some of the Congress people longer, but they don't have skin in the game. They are literally using the credit card of the United States of America or the US or whatever you want to call it, the system that we live in this country. They're using the good faith of this country and the fact that it's a global financial center, and they're wasting that money and future generations' wealth on a lot of things that are not very productive. So I want to talk about two things. The elections are coming up, so I'm going to just put this out of the way. I am not American citizen, but I support Donald Trump. The reason I support Donald Trump is because I think he's our best shot to getting rid of the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. and reducing the government, which is the most important issue for me as a business person living in the United States. So with this out of the way, I want to talk about two things that are important. And for listeners, this is not a political podcast, obviously, but it's important to understand why these issues matter for us in the hedge fund business. So number one issue is growth and productivity. Those are not very good right now. We need that. We need to grow the American economy. And when I say grow, I mean real growth. And the reason we don't have real growth is because the government is way too big in terms of spending and consumption. So when we look at GDP growth, it looks pretty decent. And there's an economist here at Stanford that just recently tweeted something about like how good the growth is, and we shouldn't listen to people saying we don't have growth. We don't have growth because this is not growth. Just for people to, I don't want to go too much into macroeconomics here, but if I borrow money and build a road, and then it takes me 3 times longer and 3 times more to build that road, and the budget is overblown, that adds to the GDP. And this is kind of what's going on in the American economy. So this is the first thing I want to clarify. Second, I want to clarify a little bit what I mean with supporting Donald Trump, because he can reduce the deep state. Let me define what deep state is and why that's so important. So I want to talk in particular about overregulation and the misappropriation of powers by bureaucrats. This is the most striking problems that this country faces. This is not even on podcast. It's October 30, 2024. This is Krim Telco. For the day, the fund is down 1.2%. The market is down 30 basis points. For the year, we are up 29.9%. The market is up 22%. We're outperforming by 7.9%. So, two things that are important to understand as the election comes. One, this economy is not very healthy. It's not bad, but it's not healthy, and we could be much, much, much healthier because we have the technological innovation that is underpinning real growth. But the government is in our way. The government is, like I said, hitchhikers with the credit cards, particularly this administration under Biden-Harris, and a potential future Harris administration would make that even worse. The reason these people are like that, I don't know. I don't know the psychology. I'm not a political scientist, but there seems to be an elite of political and bureaucratic and even business leaders who have taken it upon themselves to run this country in a way that is extractionist. So, the Obamas live in Martha's Vineyard. They live a lifestyle that is most closely related to a very privileged lifestyle. But of course, they portray themselves as colored, underprivileged people, and that they're somehow helping underprivileged people, when in fact they don't. They send their kids to the most fancy private schools. They live a lifestyle that is, in fact, exactly the opposite of the lifestyle that the people that they want, that should be voting for them, live. So this is, in my opinion, just it's a small thing, but it's a good sign for how this elitist culture is drifting away from the people that they represent. Niall Ferguson gave a speech just 2 days ago in Australia. Highly recommended. It's in the show notes. where he says he compares the United States with the Soviet Union. And he does that in a very subtle historian type way, and you can make your own opinion about that. Look, the video is only 20 minutes, so it's not that it's not that long. But he says one important thing. He says that the propaganda that the media is selling is leading to cynicism in the country, the same way that happened under the Soviet Union. I think that's a very strong indicator for that we are really run by an elite that is not in touch with the base. So where does Donald Trump come in here, or why are we so concerned about growth and productivity, and why do we think that the deep state is the problem? First, let's be clear about productivity and growth. So you get this tweet, like I said, this one economist at Stanford who likes to tweet and clearly has a very clear view of the political side that he's on and things like that, but I don't want to discuss that. Just one simple fact, he says that we had very strong economic growth under the Biden administration, and that's real. And I say, no, that's not real. With the kinds of deficits that we had or still having, and the kinds of involvement that the government now is involved in the economy, you can't really look at GDP growth anymore, because we have huge amounts of deficits. We have massive amounts of hiring. The last jobs report, 700,000 people got hired by government workers got hired. So the government is not just a passive player here. The government is the player. On top of that, we have the standing repo facility of the Fed, which is technically monetizing all the debt, and that's another complicated story that I have an episode talking about this, links in the show note. But just think about it this way. Basically, the government has we have a soft budget. That means we can spend as much as we want. Nobody's really curbing it. All this Congress, talking about debt limits is just for face. In reality, there is an open amount of spending, and that spending is like the Hitchhikers with a credit card. It is short term. It is mainly there to increase either the power of the elite or to throw some breadcrumbs to the people that should be voting this elite or keep that elite in power. So this is number one. I think it's incredibly important that we understand this, that we don't have, because for most people on the ground, this doesn't feel like a strong economy, and it should be, because we have the ingredients. We have technological innovation, we have AI, we have electrification of transportation, we have electrification of the energy infrastructure, we have space travel, we have a lot of enthusiasm in engineering and science, but we don't have that same enthusiasm in the economy, and that's because the government is stepping in and crowding out a lot of the enthusiasm, and that's a very bad thing, and we need to acknowledge that, and don't get fooled by propaganda or even misinformation or whatever you want to call it when people talk about GDP growth. The GDP that this government is showing is not real in many ways, but the most obvious way I can tell you is the following. If you have Tesla lowering prices of their cars, that is actually reducing the GDP, because they, let's say, okay, they're still growing their sales, but let's assume they sell the same amount of cars, but at a lower price. This will lower the GDP, even though they lower the price because they cut costs and they're more efficient. Versus if the government builds a road, let's say, that is budgeted for $1 billion, but it spends $3 billion on that road and borrows that money from future generations, that will add to the GDP. And this is how we have GDP growth. So that's why GDP growth is, the way it's being portrayed right now is wrong. But more importantly, I think the second reason that I want to talk about today, and the main reason why I think Donald Trump is the better choice this time, is because we need to curb down the misappropriation of powers by bureaucrats and politicians, but particularly by bureaucrats. And that needs to happen. Elon Musk is pointing out a lot of the misappropriation of power when it comes to the space industry, but this is prevalent everywhere. This is prevalent in the food industry, in the pharmaceutical industry. There is way too much misappropriation of power. President Eisenhower warned us from the military-industrial complex. And I always keep saying we have a lot more industrial complexes than just the military-industrial complex. We have the public health industrial complex, we have the academic industrial complex, and we have the academic industry, we have the academic, we have the public health, and we have the military industrial complex. Those are the three main problems in society that need to be curbed. Now, how do you curb that? I'm not a specialist in this. Elon Musk wants to go in there and fire people. The same Vivek Ramaswamy is talking about this. This is not just a hope. This is a must, because Western civilization hinges on this. We have way too high deficits. This is not just a nice to have or something like, well, we want to have a little bit of less government. Even when Reagan came in and cut the government, it wasn't this bad. This is much, much worse because the numbers are staggering. We pay more on interest than on defense. According to Niall Ferguson, every civilization that happens to be in a situation where they pay more on interest than on defense, is in decline. So we are, from that perspective, technically in decline already. And we don't want to be in decline because we're the only hope. We don't have other hopes. People are moving to Singapore, people are moving to Dubai, but it can't be that we have to escape to places like Dubai or Singapore. As good as they are, we here have a lot more to offer in terms of lifestyle, in terms of optimism, in terms of hope, in terms of freedom, and we can't give that up. But if we don't curb those misappropriation, if we don't stop this misappropriation of power by bureaucrats and elected officials, but particularly by bureaucrats, then it will just keep going. And these hitchhikers with credit cards will max out their credit cards. They're just hitchhikers. They don't care. They'll be away when the whole thing comes crashing. And then what? So that's why we need to vote for Donald Trump in this particular election. As much as he has his flaws, but he hopefully will bring in the people like Vivek, like Tulsi, like Elon, like RFK, to take care of some of the biggest excesses of misappropriation of power of bureaucrats and politics. This is the key. This is so important. I'm going to repeat it one more time. What Trump called drain the swamp in 2016 needs to happen now. And there's a good chance that it will happen. There's only one term here. There's no more nepotism, at least not announced. There is, of course, a problem of trust and things along those lines, but that's okay. But we need to curb this. By the way, there's a whole other subject of censoring media and censoring the truth and things like that, which is a massive problem, but it's in conjunction with this elitist power grab that has happened, particularly after COVID. And I think, therefore, there is hope. There is hope that this country can get back on its footing by reducing the budget of the government, by reducing the deficit to at least a balanced budget, if not even a surplus, so we can start paying down our debt. If these things happen, then the dollar, the equity markets, the economy, everything will have a boost that, in my opinion, it has never been before. I mean, we could have S&Ps doubling in 1 year, things like that. Because we have the ingredients. We have the innovation. We have entrepreneurial spirit is very strong in several areas, particularly, of course, around Elon Musk and his companies. But there's many other areas too. There's startups. There's people in the robotics community working hard. There are a lot of interesting projects to be excited about. But we need to curb the government. We need to curb the misappropriation of powers and spending by unelected bureaucrats, and, by the way, by elected politicians too. So get rid of the hitchhikers with credit cards and replace them with people who benefit themselves, but by their work benefit others even more. Thank you.